Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Let's just dive right in. I am so enjoying doing these author panels. Here's the official introduction. Writing a book can feel like a solitary endeavor, but it doesn't have to be. Building a network of fellow writers and authors can be the key to reaching your goals. Connect with experts who can guide you through intricacies of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing your business book. Remember, publishing is just the beginning. Marketing is where the real work starts. I've developed resources to help you find your author community. The BizBook Publishing Hub offers access to over 50 hub partners dedicated to assisting entrepreneurs in succeeding as authors. Visit bizbookpublishinghub.com to explore these resources. You can also join free virtual networking events and listen to the BizBook Publishing Hub podcast, which features interviews and author panels on the ROI of publishing a business book. There are two authors with us today to share their experiences and insights into the world of business books. Let's give a warm welcome to our panelists. First, we have Lisa Braithwaite, who wrote Presenting for Humans, Insights for Speakers on Ditching Perfection and Creating Connection, which offers practical advice for overcoming perfectionism and connecting more authentically with audiences. It provides actionable strategies for improving presentations and communication by embracing imperfection and focusing on genuine engagement. Sue Wilhite wrote Tech Tips for the Tech Timid, offering clear and practical advice for those overwhelmed by technology, aiming to boost confidence and proficiency with everyday tech tools. Please join me in welcoming Lisa and Sue. Lisa, I'm going to kick off this first question to you. I'd like to know, who did you have in mind when you were writing your book? Who's the ideal reader for your book?
Hello, Robbie. Hello, Sue. I primarily help nonprofit and business leaders to build visibility and credibility for their work through engaging presentations. So my ideal reader for this book was someone who's tired of taking themselves so seriously as a presenter and wants to include more audience engagement, more fun, more human connection, and to stop worrying about being the smartest or most impressive person in the room.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And Sue, what about you?
I wrote my book because there are a lot of business owners out there who do what they do really well. They're coaches, they're speaker coaches, they're plumbers, they're entrepreneurs of some kind, but tech is not in their wheelhouse. And in fact, for some of them, tech. So I wrote my book for those people who are tech averse. I call it tech timid because I like alliteration, but they're just hesitant to use tech or don't know how to get the best out of it. So that's my audience, is the entrepreneur who wants to get their toes a little wetter into the tech world.
I have a feeling that we're going to have people listening who now want both of your books, given who's writing books. There are also people who are entrepreneurs who want to get better at presenting themselves and sharing their message more authentically and just like getting over whatever angst is in their head. And then there's a tech timid piece as well related to that. So Sue, I want to follow up with you. When you were first publishing your book, you're first getting the idea of even writing this book, what were some of the metrics that you were tracking to know whether your book was going to be a success? Like at that time, like, things have probably changed, but at that time, what were the metrics that you thought, if the book does this, I'll know it was a success?
It wasn't necessarily so much about sales, but it was about the number of people who went, oh, cool, I know somebody who needs this book. So the more in networking that I had that response, that was what I was looking for. So you could call it in marketing speak organic reach, but it was really about people getting excited about the idea of the book.
Yeah, that's also really motivating to get a book finished as you're talking about a book and they're like, oh, well, when's that book coming out? That's really cool. Lisa, what about you? What were some of those early metrics you were setting around success for your book?
Very similarly to Sue, I never thought of my book as being about sales, but I would do speaking engagements and people would say, "When's your book coming out?" And so for me, success around my book was having an additional tool to share with my clients, my prospects, and to use the book as a tool for credibility as well. So I never expected to sell thousands of copies of my book or become rich or famous as an author. My metric was really using it as a tool. How many people could I get the book into their hands so that they could become more engaging as a speaker? Like Sue, just kind of how many people would be excited about having something that wasn't sort of an academic tome about public speaking, but something that was kind of fun and lighthearted and made it feel more accessible.
I love that. When you advanced in your thinking, like now that you've had the book for a little while, did that change? Because I think it's so hard for us to even know what else to track. But as you got into this, are there other metrics that started to pop up that you were like, oh, this thing happened, I want more of that, and that'll help me realize the book's selling even better, or more book sales, or better referrals, or I don't know, whatever the process might be. I'm kind of curious.
The short answer is no. Really, my definition of success about this book and the metrics are still pretty much the same. Am I getting it into the hands of the people who are really interested in it? And so that tends to be my clients, my speaking audiences, people who already know me and want more of what I have to offer, people who want something that's a lower cost, more affordable way of getting hold of my expertise. So I can't say I've changed very much the metrics, what I look at for what's been successful. It's really the word of mouth and the comments and the reviews that I get on the book. That's what I'm looking for.
We're going to get into reviews in a minute because it's one of my favorite topics, as you may know.
I
But I
know.
want to actually ask Lisa, did anyone along your author journey impress upon you either the importance of or the non-importance of hitting #1 bestseller? Like, what messaging have you been receiving around this? Because I feel like a lot of first-time authors get really strong messages around hitting #1 bestseller. And we're talking really about Amazon in this instance. Did you hear any of that? And did you hear any counter arguments about that? Because you and I are part of National Speakers Association, which is where I started hearing the counter arguments. So I'm curious how that landed for you.
Yes, absolutely. The counter arguments. Well, the main counter argument that I heard ever was that anytime sales can be manipulated by having as many people as possible go buy your book on one day, that to me, and granted, I've done that. I did that with you, and that was a really, really fun process. And it was a great way to get the word out about my book and to build excitement and, drama around this big sale. But I don't believe that is necessarily a lasting metric in terms of having a #1 bestseller in a category on Amazon for one day. I don't consider that a super useful metric for myself. So that the counter argument to me, that I heard was that a lot of these #1 sales campaigns can very easily be manipulated. In fact, there are some stories about that, about people who've manipulated the system to sell a book that literally had nothing in it. The guy who wrote the book about his foot. I don't know if you ever heard about that. So that I've never really looked at the need or the desire to become a #1 bestseller, especially because my book is not on a topic that people are all dying to read about, let's be honest, and that it can be manipulated. So that's my
I
thought
appreciate
on
you.
the concept.
I appreciate you sharing your insights on that, because I think for some people who are tuning in and they're hearing a strong message that they should be hitting #1 bestseller, they should hire a company to help them do a campaign around that. It's helpful for them to hear this sort of counter argument. And I think that the thing that really stays with me around this is that it's a fleeting victory. That hitting #1 bestseller and getting the orange ribbon could be for as little as an hour before the algorithm kicks up, and then you may have lost it again. And if you're going to end up ranked 2000 in a category within 2 days and 2 million in all of Kindle within 3 days, what was the point? So I always go for more lasting impact, and that's where we really get into the reviews. And Sue, this seems to be an area that you have struggled a little bit on. And so I'm kind of curious what launch plans you had. And Lisa, you've had some success with this. Lisa, you have, let's see, 29 total ratings and 27 reviews. And just for those listening to this, ratings are something that you're allowed to do whether or not you've even bought the book. And there's no writing requirement. You just put how many stars. So that's when we say ratings. The reviews are the number of written reviews. And what's good about 29 and 27 is the ratio. I always think it's excellent when the ratio is high, because I always find it a little dubious when I see someone who has 242 ratings and less than 10 reviews. I'm like, what kind of campaign did you run? Like just asking all your friends to run around and hit the 5-star button. So Lisa, what was your process? Because getting, close to 30 reviews, anything over 20 takes real effort and consistent effort. And I noticed you've also been getting reviews, even kind of recent, which is really cool to see. Even just the summer, you had more reviews coming in. So tell us a little bit about your launch process.
Well, my launch process, let me just say I launched my book before you launched your book. And if I had launched my book after you launched your book, I would have learned a lot more from you back in 2017 when my book came out. It was and is still a huge effort to get people to write reviews. So the ones who have written reviews are, I so appreciate the people who are willing to take the time and do that. And that's really interesting what you said about ratings versus reviews. I didn't know that. So I'm going to make a note of that. And I'm going to tell people, look, if you don't feel like you can write a review or you don't know what to say, you can still give me a rating. But I'm still going to put that out to my own audience of people who've read the book. Because yes, I don't want some weird ratio of like, I don't know, bots or strangers or people who haven't read it.
I would still ask for a review and give them support to write the review. Give them prompts to write the review. Don't let them off the hook with the ratings.
No, you're right. You're right. But it is a lot of work. That's what I'm going to say. And yes, it's taken me all this time to get 29 reviews. And I haven't worked very hard on getting reviews. I know many, many more people than 29 have bought my book and read my book. I know this for a fact. So you've given me some inspiration. I'm speaking to a group in about 3 weeks, a group of about 100 people who the organizer has already bought books for everyone at the event. So I will be giving them all the support they need to read the book and write a review of the book.
Brilliant. Hey, Sue, was reviews part of your launch process at all? Like, were you thinking much about that, or #1 bestseller? Tell us a little bit about how you were approaching the launch.
So just to give a little bit of background, back in 2005, I found that I didn't have enough books, so I bought a bookstore. And I had a bookstore of my own for a while. And then the 2008 crash happened, and I went to work for another bookstore that was significantly larger and reported to the New York Times. That is the metric that most people use as credibility. If I made it on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list, oh my goodness, you would be hearing the woohoos from Alaska. It would be a huge deal. And what you said earlier about get on Amazon for 5 minutes, you're #1, woohoo. You're back down to 25 million in all of Kindle. it's a nice thing to be able to say. I put a little badge on my book that said I was a #1 bestseller because I have been through those launch campaigns and did it. But the reason I launched my book was, in the way that I was launching my book was, #1, for credibility purposes. But second, I really thought long and hard about my title, because I wanted my title to be something that reflected me. So my launch was more about my title. That was the thing that I was really focused on, of what can I do to make people not afraid to open the book and read it, but also not afraid to approach me. Because regardless of my Amazon sales, people have seen that I have the book, Tech Tips for the Tech Timid, and they go, oh, she gets me. Let me contact her. Whether or not they buy my book, they're going to come to me. So that was one of the reasons. That was one of the thoughts in my process for launch, because in the bookstore business, titles sell.
Mm-hmm.
Titles sell. That's the biggest thing. So
thank you. You know, you were talking a moment ago about New York Times bestseller, and I'm going to mostly leave that off the conversation, except to say that just like Amazon bestseller status, people are gamifying getting on New York Times, hitting #1. It's a few people who have done it more organically, and they've worked really, really hard for it. But there's also these companies that are always pitching me to be part of my networks, and I'm like, no, thank you. So I think that's a whole separate piece. I mostly focus on reviews because I see them as social proof on the book sales page. And when people are considering whether or not to buy your book or hire you to speak or buy your book for a book club discussion, I always think, like, how do we differentiate ourselves from other people in our topic? And that's a level of credibility that sort of stays regardless of the number of sales happening in that week. So that's, to me, it's part of engaging with our network. And I have hit #1 bestseller 30 times across 3 books and 4 countries, which is a longer way of saying I'm a #1 international bestseller, which I don't say because I think folks like Phil M. Jones, who wrote Exactly What to Say and has a gazillion copies in 30 languages, he deserves to have that title. And some folks who hit #1 in Canada and #1 in the US declare themselves international bestselling authors. So it doesn't have that much weight behind it. So, I mean, I think that we want to leverage momentum, and I love the idea that the book gives you a reason to talk to people and for people to reach out and talk to you. That is definitely the main reason for having this. I'm kind of curious, Sue, other than getting reviews, was there anything else about this process that was a big challenge? Was it the writing part, the marketing part, getting ideas out of your head? Like, was there a piece of this that you felt like, oh, I had to overcome that, but now I learned a lot?
yes, I am what I call a starter. I love to start projects, and I go into it with a lot of energy, and here we are. And I wrote out my outline and I had everything going, and I get to the end, and no matter how interesting the topic, somewhere about the latter third or latter quarter, it's a slog. And I know from previous experience, I just have to buckle down and do it. But it makes me feel like my last chapters are less than my beginning chapters. And it doesn't matter what order I do them in. It's just the way it is. So that's the one thing. Just keep going.
I mean, that's just true. I think a lot of people are going to really relate. That's going to be like, I resonate with that kind of comment, because getting things started is always more exciting than the enduringness of having to finish it and keep going, and the slog, like as you described it. As we write, if we're writing with a community who's giving feedback, that can sometimes help because we don't feel like we're just writing in isolation. Lisa, did you have a particular writing practice that helped you get through that, or was writing something that came more naturally to you?
Here was my writing practice. I wrote a blog for 10 years and then I turned it into my book.
That's awesome.
So I love writing, but the idea of sitting down and writing a whole book has no appeal to me. So what happened was I had already been writing a blog. I had at the time, I had almost 1,500 blog posts. And I met a book coach, one of our mutual friends in NSA. And I just said to her, I said, you know what? All the book coaches out there want to help me write a book from scratch. I don't want to write a book from scratch. I already have almost 1,500 blog posts. How do I write a book from that? And she took me on. She took on another person at the same time. And all three of us, because she decided, oh, I also have a blog that I can turn into a book. All three of us turned our blog posts into books at the same time. And so speaking of having people to write with, even though I wasn't writing from scratch, I was still compiling, revising, working with an editor, bringing things kind of up to date, doing all the things that you want to do to make it a cohesive, coherent book. And so it helped to be connected to other people who were doing that at the same time. But to this day, and I still haven't written my second book yet, but my second book will be the same. It will be compiled from articles in my blog, articles I've written on LinkedIn. It's going to be compiled from things I've already written because that's what works best for me, writing in that kind of short essay format and then compiling it all together is just that feels right to me and that feels like my style. So that's what my second book will be as well. So actually it wasn't hard at all, but I spent 10 years getting to that point.
So it's brilliant. And I believe you're talking about Kathy Fayok and her
Yes.
book, which I'll mention here. It's called Blog to Book. It's blog, the number 2 book, all one word, repurposing content to discover the book you've already written. And I have to say, if you've written 1,500 blog posts, you have at least one book. And even if you don't have 1,500 blog posts, just the consistency of writing. I am actually going to go on record here that I have a 4th book coming. And I partly have a 4th book coming because I've already created it. Like, I have an online program that walks people through a book launch process that I use with my coaching clients. And it's both something you can use on your own with a little bit of support from me, or if you're doing one-on-one coaching with me, you get access to this. And I have the transcripts for every one of the videos already sitting there in the program. And I've got visuals that I've created for the program. So it's just like, it's a matter of actually figuring out what not to include as opposed to what to include. And I also think by paying attention to creating the book, it'll help me refine the online program. And it'll probably lead to me creating extra bonus content for the online program that will differentiate it from the book. And some of that will become bonus content from the book as well. So it's just really interesting that once you have these formats, you can kind of play with them a little bit. If writing is hard, then there are other ways to kind of trick yourself into creating it and getting the idea out there. I will mention one other idea that I did for my first book. I got booked to do a presentation on my topic, and I created a slide deck and I wrote all the notes out, which I don't usually do. But the act of writing the notes out for every slide also gave me a ton of content for that book to get the ideas out of my head. So a couple of ways to move past that challenge of writing. I'm curious if one of you has a really good story about an effective marketing tool or marketing strategy that led to more book sales. So, I mean, I know that we're not about the individual sales. I'm always thinking, like, how do you sell a lot of books at once? And I'm curious if you have a story. So, Sue, is there something in particular you've been able to do that led to a bunch of books being sold?
It was in the first week of the launch. I had been doing a lot of networking. I went to at least one networking event a day and sometimes 2 a day for the previous 2 weeks. And then that week, and it was like, okay, it's coming. See, here's the cover. It's coming. And I went to several people that I know who know me and got book blurbs from them and made sure that they sent information out saying, hey, I just did a book blurb for this gal and I really think her book is awesome and I think you should get it because I put my name on it. So
Ooh,
that
I have
was
to
really
say,
helpful.
I'm going to interject here because you just said something I've never heard anyone say, and it feels like an obvious next step. So book blurbs also would be known as endorsement reviews or editorial reviews or endorsements. It's the content that is usually on the inside cover or sometimes the back cover of a book. Ideally, not more than 10 because we assume it's going to be a good review because you wouldn't publish it if it wasn't a good review. And it's usually from people who have some kind of notoriety or like I don't know, perceived expertise, or they were an author, a New York Times bestseller, an executive director, something important. But the idea that not only do you ask them to write that, but that you ask them to publicly share their endorsement of your book in some way is an obvious next step that I don't know a lot of authors are doing that. Usually it's just like, hey, thank you, I'm going to put it in the book, and maybe later on asking them to publish it as an Amazon review. But if it's true, they were willing to take the time to put their name with that, maybe they can post it on LinkedIn, right? And tag you and say, I'm really excited for this book that's coming out. In fact, I wrote an endorsement for it. Like, what a great idea to kind of leverage their social capital a little bit just to get the word out. Lisa, was there something in particular that you were able to do that helped lead to lots of book sales?
I wish I had thought of the thing that you just mentioned because, yeah, the people who gave my book endorsements, they were lovely and they put their, for the most part, put their reviews on Amazon. But of course, I didn't think of asking them to put that on LinkedIn or some other place. So again, I needed your strategy back when my book came out. I would say that my most effective marketing strategy has been offering books to my speaking and training clients. But again, I am a professional speaker and trainer. That's what I do. So I'm in front of small and large groups all the time. And the majority of my topics are about presentation skills. So my book is always a supplement. It's always a tool that can supplement the message that I've delivered in my programs, again, for a really low cost to the people who are already paying me to come in and do a training. So that's been my best marketing tool to get the book in as many hands as possible.
When you are setting up a speaking engagement, do you gift them a certain number of books? Do you give them a discount if they buy a certain number of books? Like, how do you bring up the books in the sales process?
It actually depends because if I'm speaking for, say, a large amount of my training is in very small groups of 12 to 25 people because I do full day training with companies. So if it's 12 people, I will include books. I will just include I give them several options for pricing as we do. I will give them several options for what they want. Do they want a half day training? Do they want a full day training? Do they want to include follow-up webinars and all these kinds of things? And books will always be an option to be included, but they're a really low cost option for me, obviously, to include for a dozen to 25 people. Now, if I'm doing a speaking engagement for 500 people or even 100 people, then I might offer that as something separate. And it'll be more of a keynote fee in that sense. So that might be more of a keynote speaking engagement. And then I will also offer them a certain number of books for a discounted rate. Sometimes I'll just offer digital copies of my books. For example, speaking to several hundred people, personally, I'm not really interested in shipping 500 or 1,000 books to a place. So I will offer digital versions sometimes for something like that. But it really depends. It depends on the kind of conversation we have in the negotiation.
I am going to bring Lois Kramer into the conversation because I'm working with her in her second edition of Book More Business. And she has this phrase that basically it's something like, "Oh, would you like to make sure people go home with some of these ideas? Because I have a great
No.
book."
Let me interject. It's, would it make sense?
Thank you.
Would it make
Would it make sense?
Yes, I'm a huge fan of Lois. Lois
Yes.
is the person who wrote her blog to book with Kathy when I did. And I've been following Lois and reading all of her books
Would
for
it make
years.
sense?
And yes, I do have the would it make sense conversation if the book hasn't already been included. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, because I think we also forget that sometimes there's a separate budget for books, separate from a speaking engagement budget. Especially if there's not a lot of money for speaking, there might be another budget where you can pull from to buy books. Who knows? You just got to ask them, and sometimes magically more money shows up. Sue, I'm going to come back to you. I'm curious how clear you were, and it sounds like you had some thoughts on this given the title conversation we had a moment ago. But I'm curious how the book related to your business goals. So as you were writing it and the book was coming out, how closely you were able to sort of identify a pipeline between, okay, someone's going to buy my book or hear about my book and they're going to want to talk to me, and then we'll have some sort of engagement conversation. Was that crystallizing as you were writing the book? Did it start to fall in place more after the book came out? Just curious how the book ties closely into the business strategies you have.
So I was pivoting my coaching business from being a coach, a business coach, to being a tech coach for businesses. So I was very clear that this book was to assist in that pivot and help people know more clearly what it was that I was doing. So yeah, the title was Tech Tips for the Tech Timid. I wanted to help business owners who were struggling with tech to be able to reach out to me and say, look, I have no clue what lead pages are. I don't know, how do I set up my invoicing? What do I do in an email campaign? I have no clue. What is this Google thing? I literally had somebody say, what is this Google thing to me? So, and it's not their wheelhouse. It's not what they do. And so it was very clear to me that I had to put stuff in the book, and it had to be humorous and simple. So the title and the content had to be very in sync, so to speak, and make it in sync with me, because I use a lot of humor to help deflate and diffuse the fear and the loathing that people have for tech.
Sue, did you have lead magnets in the book, like any kind of bonus content and stuff? Oh, share a little bit about how you approach that.
I have QR codes in the book, and I also have I had a QR code for more information. I have recommendations throughout the book, and I had a QR code at the end that said, hey, if you just want to get all the recommendations in one place, I have a page for you where I've got all of them. And I said, please refer to this, because a book is a moment in time, and I will update the web page on things that have changed, because they do, and they did. Between the time I wrote it and the time I had to change the web page. Look, this has changed.
Yeah, I mean, Sue, I wrote a book about technology myself, and as I was writing the book, it was changing. So at some point, you're like, all right, I got to just go and hit publish.
Yeah,
Sue,
and then
was that an opt-in? Like people had to give an email address in order to do that?
No, but I had an offer at the end where I said, look, if any of this sparks your interest, here's a QR code to sign up for a free 45-minute consultation with me, and we'll just talk about tech or your business or whatever it is that you need to. And that went to my lead page that has a video about me and captures emails.
Great. Has that worked? That offering the 45-minute consult?
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I think people probably hesitate to do things like that, but the goal here is to turn readers into people who are like connecting and engaging and hopefully becoming clients. So whatever we can do to smooth that path for them from one step to the other.
Make it easy.
Make it easy. Lisa, what about you? How did you approach the book, turning into business for you?
I also have a link. I did not know or really wasn't aware of QR codes when my book came out, but I do have a link to a page where people can go download bonus content. I find that not many people do that. But you have inspired me again to go and just double check and update that page. I mean, I have updated in the 7 years. There is a newer version of it, but I should probably go and update it again and just double check that everything is on there that I want to be. So that's something I did as well, to invite people basically to go and get the bonus content, to get on my mailing list in order to receive that bonus content. So I do have that in my book. And also, I mean, just really for building my business, again, I wanted my audiences and clients to have something tangible to take away from speaking engagements. And this really was my primary goal, to be able to serve my audiences and serve my clients. And again, use it as a tool for building credibility and visibility.
That's awesome. When you're thinking about these online tools, it's also a good idea for us to fill out the form ourselves once a year and make sure everything is still working. Because I've definitely had hiccups happen where something has changed, and I'm like, I haven't gotten any entries for a while. It's like, oh, well, let's make sure it's actually operational. One of the things I did for all my books is I created a landing page. I happen to use Lead Pages, which Sue mentioned. I created a landing page for my book, which is separate from the Amazon sales page. And that's where I can put all the screenshots from the, #1 bestseller ribbons. I can talk about the bonus content. And if people want the bonus content or they want the book, they click the button and it basically says like, hey, do you want to get the bonus content before you buy the book? And it just offers them the opportunity to opt into my email list and get that content without even buying it. And then if they do, they're then sent to the Amazon page through my Amazon affiliate link. So most of the time I direct people to those landing pages. The exception was when we did this Kindle cross promotion campaign where we were all driving traffic to our individual Amazon book pages. And I'm so thrilled how that has come together. And we'll be doing another one of those in the Black Friday area, and then again next year around Amazon Prime Days. But I hear from a lot of folks like Lisa, whose books are over 5 years old, that it really like revived the author's energy around that book, because it wasn't a book that was currently on top of their minds, but it's evergreen content. So I'm glad you were able to bring that back to the forefront for yourself and for all of us who benefited from reading it. Does anyone have a particular success story because of being an author? We talked a lot about how having the author, status, having the book sort of attract certain people. Did either of you have an opportunity that came your way because you have this book? Lisa.
I'll share something that just happened recently. I was talking to somebody who had heard me speak, had seen me speak at an event, wanted me to come and speak to their chapter of the organization. And they were just kind of spitballing topic ideas. But this one woman, she loved the subtitle of my book so much. And I will repeat it again. The book title is Presenting for Humans: Insights for Speakers on Ditching Perfection and Creating Connection. And she loved that ditching perfection and creating connection concept so much that she asked for a workshop just on that topic. So it was a shift from, it was not exactly the content in the book, but a different kind of a communication topic. And so I ended up creating a whole new workshop for them, which I've now delivered a couple of times, because new and repeat clients. And of course, I like to remind my repeat clients, hey, I have new things, I have new topics that I'm speaking on. And so I've already delivered that a couple times. And I just turned it into a short talk video for a course creation company that I work with that got my another one of my courses onto LinkedIn Learning. So I'm not saying this short talk is going to end up on LinkedIn Learning necessarily, but just that one client, and this is what Sue was talking about regarding titles. people love that subtitle so much. And in this case, that subtitle took on a life of its own and became its own program. And now it's a whole new thing that I can offer.
I love when that happens, and I agree. It's a very catchy turn of phrase. I really do like it. We're about to get into the final question I have about what advice you have for someone who's writing a book to help them grow their business. Before I do that, and I'm going to kick it to Sue in a moment, we have a quick word from our sponsor. All right, Sue, what advice would you give someone who's writing a book to help them grow their business?
Talk to potential and actual clients. What do they want? This, I've got to say, this is the thing that I didn't do right for years. And you've got to ask the people that you're serving, what is it that they really want, not what's in your head that you think they want. I rearranged the chapters in my book because I threw some things out because people said, oh, I don't care. That doesn't make any difference to me. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. So always go to your pool of other genius that really serves you in getting the book to be what they want to buy.
This is so key because there's the problem that people have that they're willing to admit, which is different than the problem you think they have, and the solution you've created is for the problem you think they have, but they don't know they have that problem. So there's something that they're aware of and they're willing to ask their friends about, their colleagues about, and they're willing to like post questions and, on chat boards or something. So making sure you pull them in for that and then help them realize the bigger problem. And that is also a way for a book to then lead to people wanting to reach out to you, because now they're like, oh my gosh, there's way more involved than I actually realized. So don't write in silence. Don't write in privacy, and like make sure that you are being somewhat public and engaged with your potential readers. I think that's excellent advice towards writing a really good book, which is probably the best advice we can give anyone, is write a relevant book that is very good quality. Hey, Lisa, what about you? What advice would you give someone who is writing a book to help them grow their business?
I would say, don't forget to talk about your book. Don't forget to share your book in all the places that you're sharing the other aspects of your business. And I say this as someone whose book came out 7 years ago. So it's not fresh to me anymore, but it's still fresh to anybody who's never heard of it or who has never read it. And as you pointed out, Robbie, a book is evergreen content. Now, every book has a few things that are out of date. There are a couple things in my book that are a little bit out of date, but the concepts are great. The concepts are going to work and be evergreen and be valid forever. So keep talking about it, keep sharing it, and keep finding ways to integrate it with the other things you're offering in your business.
That's wonderful. Hey, Lisa, how can people find you and follow your work?
I am very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So please look for Coach Lisa B on Instagram. And it's also Coach Lisa B or Lisa Braithwaite on LinkedIn. And my website is also coachlisab.com. So anywhere you go looking for Coach Lisa B, you will probably find me.
Brilliant. And Sue, what about you? How can people find you and follow your work?
I am on LinkedIn. You can look for Sue Wilhite. And my website is mstechcoach.com, mstechcoach.com.
Excellent. I'm going to put all these in the show note at bizbookpublishinghub.com, which is where you'll also find the whole hub community. There are more than 50 hub partners. These are experts that help entrepreneurs navigate the complexities of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing their business books. 6 times a year, I host a free virtual networking event for writers and authors to get to know each other and the hub partners. And then twice a year, I organize the Kindle cross promotion campaign, which you can learn more about as well. If you go to bizbookpublishinghub.com, you'll get all the podcast notes and everything else. And I can't wait to support more of the authors becoming successful authors out there in the world. Thank you, Lisa and Sue, for joining us for this conversation.